thanks to everyone who is joining today. It's very exciting for me to speak about PropTech and mobility and the relation they have in the built environment and how we can essentially construct a smart city of the future and the kind of key elements that should take place in order for this to happen. A little bit before I go into my vision of this and the role of an innovation ecosystem, I think it will be useful to tell you a little bit about me and who I am. So if I just share my screen right now, 1 second. Okay, so yeah, who I am essentially and why am I talking about innovation and ecosystems. So I moved to London without knowing anyone for university. Pretty much, again, making these connections, engaging with different participants within I guess in the beginning it was more earlier stage entrepreneur and university ecosystem. And then I went into media journalism. So I guess how this relates to, in general, innovation is being able to talk to different people and interacting with people far from different backgrounds. I later on went into PropTech startup where kind of channeled this media experience into PR, which later on grew into kind of ecosystem building. And from PropTech and tech and entrepreneurship, it went into urban mobility, where I joined a London Connectory, which is an urban mobility co-creation hub by Bosch in partnership with TfL. And it's the first time that I actually had experience engaging with the public sector at a very close level and seeing how open the public sector is to innovators, which was really, I think it was a great experience. And after that, I went into venture capital, which I am right now, and I work for a PropTech VC called Roundhill Ventures, and we invest in businesses that reshape the built environment through tech. The overlap between built environment, essentially the built environment is very fragmented. So in a way to connect the real estate ecosystem, we started our own initiatives, which I will go into later into more detail. But in essence, what I would like you to get from the talk today is that the digitization of the built environment is taking place. There are several challenges. There is overlap between sectors, and I would like you to understand more about why collaboration is necessary. What is an innovation ecosystem? So who are the actors first that should work together and why they should work together, and how you can promote innovation within your organization. Firstly, quick stats about the built environment. It is responsible for a large share of carbon emissions, and cities account for more than half of the world's population and generate 80% of global GDP. So they are super important into our infrastructure and environment, and they are facing increasing environmental pressures. And their infrastructure needs to adapt as a result of globalization, urbanization, and climate change. For example, buildings consume twice the amount of energy that they're designed to in London. And by 2050, essentially 68% or close to 70% of the global population will live in urban areas. So the cities as they are now, they may not be adaptable to the future and to the essentially they need to be agile, and they need to put certain measures in place which will help them be sustainable in the longer term. So the cities of tomorrow, essentially. So how do we construct these cities of tomorrow today so that they can house an extra 2.5 billion people? Well, there will be a need for more infrastructure, improvement of health services, and better management of energy resources. The new technologies can not only build better living spaces, but they can optimize existing ones. And this is also key to external connected sites, such as workplace transformation. So this is, I guess, one of the challenges is how do we get new technologies to work in old environments? And one way to kind of try to transform this is through technology, technology innovation. And this is why, for example, only in the past year alone, 16 billion was invested into real estate technologies. And cities are leveraging technology and data to make better decisions and deliver a higher quality of life for its residents. So that goes from reducing traffic congestion to improving air quality. One of the, for example, the European Union view of a smart city is that this concept supports the idea of environmental sustainability as its prime aim. And one of the biggest challenges that cities face is obviously global, the environmental challenges and global warming. So they are both global warming's cause, victim, but yet they're also the greatest hope for a solution. Later on, if I go to new mobility solutions, which was also the other side of this talk, is that essentially the cities are changing, our infrastructure is changing, but so are, I'm not sure whether the slides are actually visible.
Yes, we can see the slides.
Okay. So yeah, so new, the role of new mobility solutions. So there is in essence 1.2 billion global car fleet that will double by 2030. The air quality is, I think, key when you think about new mobility solutions coming in. So in essence, a lot to do is, yes, it is optimizing the way that people get from point A to point B, but it's also how the new choices that we make in the way that we are going to get from point A to point B are going to impact the built environment, and they are going to impact essentially the climate, the global climate. It used to be that the car before was a necessity. It was a symbol of prestige. People had to use their car in a lot of occasions in order to move to places, and it was there wasn't also a lot of options available, but also it wasn't in people's mentality that they would change and they would go to public transport, for example, if they could use their vehicle. Whereas now this is changing. There are so many new mobility solutions available, whether that's mobility as a service, whether that's dockless bike, ride sharing, companies that are innovating in that space, and they are raising investment. They are essentially facilitating this change, but this change alone cannot be done from a startup level. It has to be done by working together with the public sector and with the corporates, and also within the different stakeholders that have overlapping interests from other industries. So for example, one is insurance. Let's say that we are having on-demand solutions that are mobility solutions. We have to see how, if we are to have drones, let's say on-demand drones, how would insurance for them take place? And it is about this collaboration between the actors within the ecosystem. So these are some of the, I guess, some of the challenges. The opportunities is that personal mobility, as well as the mobility of goods and services, will no longer require, let's say, an advanced reservation. It will be just more seamless, and it will be easier to achieve. Other factors that are taking place is not only the solutions that are available right now, the new solutions in mobility, they are available because of innovation, but also because the other factors are changing, such as, let's say, sustainability awareness in people, their own user behavior is changing. But in order to implement solutions that are scalable and that are accepted within wide within the wide population, a key element for that is actually education, and it is getting people to understand that, one, they have this available option, and two, that why is it, for example, better than the existing one? Is it cheaper? Is it more efficient? Is it is it going to save them? Essentially, time and money is the key factors. And this education piece is really important in any kind of industry where digitization is taking place. I'm not sure how I'm going with, I think with time, I may struggle with time. So I will go into what is innovation because I don't want to be left without time. So let me just
Don't worry about it. Keep going.
Okay, so about innovation, in essence, a lot of, if you, I actually wanted to start with that. I wanted to start with saying that when I said it to my mom, what I'm going to talk about today, she couldn't understand what was the title of the talk. And she asked me, like, what are you going to actually speak about? Because it is full with buzzwords. It is a smart city, it is innovation, it is ecosystem. Yet, what do all those terms actually mean? We are using them in our own vocabulary, in our own day-to-day activities, yet a lot of it is kind of open to interpretation. So I guess for me, what innovation is, it's not a process, a product or a service, but it is a process, not a product or a service. And it's also kind of making this match between problem and a solution. So it is, in a lot of ways, new entrepreneurs, new concepts are coming to play because they are taking ideas from inception to impact. It's not always profit, because it could mean social change and it could mean environmental change, but it is something that is a collaborative, essentially a collaborative activity. And MIT has a very good definition of big innovation and small innovation. And big innovation is viewed as the process that is, taking science or tech or research to impact. And that is like the big change. That is the 10x change that is facilitated by entrepreneurs, by startups, by venture capitalists. And the innovative behavior that is on a very smaller level, and this is culture. This is essentially like this very small 10% piece of the puzzle. And organizations say that they want innovation, but a lot of times they struggle to actually achieve it and to actually put it in place. Which it is a challenge. It is a challenge when an organization is operating in a traditional industry, because there are a lot of set processes that need to be essentially transformed or seen as to how they could be made to work better. And where this brings us is to the ecosystem, which an ecosystem, it cannot. It can be in different. It can be in different geographies. It can be in different sectors. But we will find in the future that the interconnection is growing, and it used to be that organizations, such as large organizations, when they were looking for innovation, they would go to this kind of ecosystem centers. That could be like very big cities such as New York, London, Berlin, and they would kind of look for innovators into local areas. Whereas I think right now, with the capabilities of internet and with the kind of connectivity in between all this kind of support networks, all the resources that are available to cross-share, I think from that perspective, it is easier for big organizations to engage with innovators. But yeah, of course, there is still a lot to be done to promote it further. Who are essentially, when we talk about ecosystem and when we talk about stakeholders, who are they? These stakeholders. This I think is 5 groups that have been identified. So this is the government, the corporates, the entrepreneurs, universities, and risk capital, which is the venture capital firms. And venture capital is crucial to, in essence, creating the businesses of the future, because it is the funds, but it's not the only element of the puzzle. Again, entrepreneurs or the public sector as well, they have to be working. They have to be working together, and there has been a shift to an open innovation approach, even in the public sector. For example, organizations sharing their resources, such as data, for entrepreneurs and for innovative SMEs to come and see whether they can use this data and whether they can develop a solution that can be at later stage scaled. And I think also, other than sharing it individually within the local communities, what we see increasingly is cities collaborating with other cities in different regions and in different geographies. So what are the challenges then for such innovation ecosystem to develop? Well, we already said that traditional industries have a lot of set processes. Some of these set processes have been operating in silos and not sharing enough information, so the collaborative measures are not put in place yet. It also depends on, and it relates to the leadership example and the importance of good, strong leadership in both organizations and in big whether it's a big corporate organization or whether it's a public sector entity. The importance of leadership is crucial. And of course, it is understandable why it has been a slower approach to that, because there are certain challenges that leaders would face, such as in big corporations, such as, for example, the fear of failure, the desire for immediate results, and in essence, it is very difficult to understand which problem to. First of all, it is crucial for the right problem statement to be put in place. So, what is the problem that we're trying to solve, and also who comes up with it? So, in certain entities, it may be that people have to look for ideas or feedback from other externally, and also. It is kind of creating this environment for innovation to take place. So creating this enabling conditions, learning what works, kind of scaling out what doesn't work and scaling up what works, and encouraging feedback. So encouraging this kind of continuous knowledge change and encouraging a culture of innovation within an organization, I think is really important. I kind of have prepared a few examples of innovation ecosystem and how this relates to being in practice. So if we go to, so the Mayor of London's Civic Innovation Challenge, this is an example of London essentially engaging with innovators so that future solutions can be put into place. And as you can see, there have been 3 public sector entities, and I have listed kind of what each challenge is. But in essence, this is an open call for innovators. So I think that is really important for cities and for public sector figures to kind of create this to be an active part within the ecosystem, so that people who are entrepreneurs who are looking to create solutions in that sector and who are looking to innovate, they know who is the best person to reach. And I see it all the time here in London. There are certain people who work within the public sector that are always even engaging in startup events, and they are always present. And I think that is really important, because entrepreneurs and SMEs can identify with them easier and can also know who is the person that they could reach out to. And sometimes, there is the challenge of, if you are a startup and you want to engage with the public sector, let's say, or a big corporation, not everybody would be on the right stage. So you have to have earned, let's say, a certain amount of revenue. You have to have established certain product market fit in order for you to actually be able to work with them. But I think knowing that this is an opportunity, it's just very important, and it helps. So and this, as I mentioned, this is an example that the city is actually helping entrepreneurs validating a solution, testing it, and finding a product market fit, and also opening up its kind of resource, knowledge and expertise to it. And also, of course, this is good for brand awareness, because the people who are participating in this challenge, obviously their companies would get a lot more publicity, which is always helpful for finding new clients. But I guess one other case study that I wanted to bring in was, sorry, just want to see. Okay, so one other case study I wanted to bring was London Connectory, which is an urban mobility co-creation hub by Bosch, run by Nitrous, which is a startup, and in partnership with TfL. So it is actual representation of how an innovation ecosystem can take place and can be nurtured. So it is an opportunity. This is an actual environment, so an enabling entrepreneurial environment where innovators can come. They can share. First of all, they can understand what are the problems that are being solved. So what are the transport challenges that London is facing, and see whether their solution is a match, and also get the expertise, be immersed into that community, and in essence, co-create solution to address a challenge that London is facing, which it could relate to more efficient vehicles. It could relate to reducing congestion, improving air quality, safety as well, and in essence, the key stakeholders that we spoke about earlier working together and having the physical facilities to do so. And I think this is with the relation to urban mobility, but this would be a good concept to put in place with other verticals as well. So a case study that I wanted to quickly bring in for e-scooters in buildings, for example, as a way for PropTech and mobility to be put together, or real estate, more of a from a real estate angle, I guess, would be the micromobility. Essentially, micromobility is only growing, and how we can see it in practice is. Let's say one of the companies that has done that is Spin. It's a scooter company, and they have partnered up with big corporation, which is Magnolia Capital in Chicago, and they're deploying charging stations and scooters in the buildings, which they call this deployment Spin hubs, and it is not only a great way for to improve transit connections between the residents of these buildings, but it also engages the local communities and tenants. It is an amenity for the people who are living in the buildings, but it's also great. But it's also benefiting the kind of entrepreneur or the SME in that perspective, because it opens them to different audience, and it integrates within. Essentially, it is solving a challenge of infrastructure challenge, and also it is making it. It is promoting the shift away from car usage, which also relates to better air quality. So, in essence, changing kind of the concept of urban design, and. We didn't really go into too much detail about smart building strategies, but enhancing how people how people's productivity levels and how people's well-being is when they are in indoor spaces is really key, because we do spend most of our time indoors, and we do spend most of our time in buildings. So wellness in buildings is another topic, but certainly coming up at present. And very quickly about innovation ecosystem. So this is kind of like a perspective from something very recent, from Roundhill Ventures, which is our monthly real estate forum that we started, PropTech Connect. And we have, through this format, brought the key leaders essentially within Europe's real estate ecosystem together. And this is to encourage open communication, to encourage knowledge sharing. And when we had the data-driven innovations event last month, it was really important. I think it was really interesting how the conversations that were taking place before the actual panel started and after the panel, they were giving the audience and the attendees a different level of perspective. So I guess my point is that in order for us to create the smart cities of the future, and in order for us to be as advanced, to kind of put the right technologies in place, and in order to solve the right problems, we actually need to be working together, and we need to create the conditions for such kind of interactions to take place. It is very, you would think that, for example, an event or a roundtable, this is very naive, or it's very, it's a one-off. Let's say that it may be a one-off activity, but it's actually not true, because the connections that you would foster into an event like that, this is something that you can take and you can follow it up with an actual activity. And I know for a fact that the startups that followed up with the public sector from this event have been more than 3, let's say, just from one event. I guess that is how we looked. I guess that is kind of my presentation. If I have to give, like, let's say, if I have to give quick tips to the different audiences, because I know that I've been joined by people from the public sector, people from the private sector that are both from the entrepreneurial and from the kind of bigger organization side. I guess in order to enable innovation, you need to put the right processes in place, and the right processes start from within. So it is kind of creating this culture of openness and of open communication, and to embrace agility and to make it okay for, I guess, even failure to take place, because this is something that we as corporations, I guess, could learn from startups, that they have to adapt quickly their solutions, and they have to, essentially, they have to, sorry, I'm on a, sorry. Yes. So, is there any questions?
Well, thank you. I did have one question to follow up in terms of the I guess what looked like a peer group meeting that you were just describing. Can you talk about some of the attendees that you have on the panels for those that are in the discussions?
First of all, who am I talking with?
This is Derek from Global PropTech.
Okay. The attendees were from the public sector, from the private sector, essentially startups and corporations, and it was with a real estate focus. So the people who are taking part were at large working within the real estate angle. If I have to give you names, I guess what I would like to point out is that because we are doing the format as a VC, so in the previous format that it was the data-driven innovations one, we had one of our portfolio companies on the panel, which was Sensat. So they do a digital twins for infrastructure project and they use drone technology. And the person who has spoken on this panel, it's their chief scientist, and he spoke on a different panel of mine for London Connectory, which is the urban mobility co-creation hub, a while back. So you can see actually overlap between the different areas. Even though one is prop tech focused and the other one is mobility focused, one company can offer insights that relate to both angles.
Perfect. Thank you. And I'd just like to say, if you have any questions, please write them in the Q&A panel at the bottom of your screen. We'll give it a minute to see if there's any questions that come through.
And I guess I just wanted to quickly, set the tips that I can give for people who are watching is that it's really important to establish trust and to ask questions and be willing to listen if you're working in a big organization, and promote creativity. What is the challenges that your team is facing on a day-to-day basis? Have they found a pattern that could be taken to the next level? And if they feel confident, I guess, enough to share, and if they understand that what they are experiencing actually may be part of a bigger piece of the puzzle, I guess that is that also relates to culture. So leadership is really important.